So welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Fantasy Kickabout. We obviously took a little bit of a break during the international window, the international break. So we are back with O'Hara and Donnacha, both obviously wearing their Liverpool jerseys. How are we keeping, lads? We were obviously just discussing off air really quickly there about the lack of haircuts between us and stuff. So hope we're all keeping well during the lockdown.
Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, my hair is just an absolute disgrace. Like, look at the state of this thing. I think that I heard birds chirping in it the other morning. That's what are you most looking forward to after lockdown? Getting a haircut, pretty high up the list for me. But otherwise, ticking along, dying to get back out on a golf course, which it looks like we're going to be able to by the end of the month, which like is so overdue. But I won't go into all my gripes about the Irish government because that's just a dangerous track to go down that path. So we won't.
O'Hara, what's higher up your list? Haircut, golfing?
Oh, haircut, 100%. Like, my God, the joy of getting a good haircut in a barber now. I remember when they were open over Christmas and going in, and we hadn't been able to get one in a while, and then thinking, oh, this might be the last time I get it again for another few months. Like, oh, it's such a pain that lads' hair grows so quickly. Where like girls can just let it grow and like it'll be growing for months and months, and it only has actually grown a couple of inches where you wouldn't even notice.
I almost miss the like 10 or 15 minutes of talking absolute shite to the barber. How are things? Grand. How's work? Grand. Yeah. And then you just sort of analogous to like talking to the taxi man in Ireland. You just just like Ireland, like a barber in Ireland is like almost a form of a therapist, aren't they? They do.
100%.
It's like, how are you? Grand, yeah. No, the wife kicked me out too. And like, oh, what happened? I was just 3 around the sides, and I'll tell you what happened.
and the thing is, with the barber, he's probably had that same conversation with 27
they are pseudo psychologists, I reckon, at this point. And they probably hear another thing about barbers I notice is they hear a lot of like secretive shit. Like barbers have their ear to the ground. Like if you want to know about what's going on with the whole, gangland Dublin scene, go into a Dublin barber's and he'll tell you exactly who did what to who and when and how and where that body part is. Like they know shit they shouldn't know.
It's almost like walking into a confession box.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, that's exactly it. They used to say that, like in Ireland, like the Ireland's therapist was always the barman. That if a guy comes up into a bar by himself and sits up at the counter, as the barman, it's your job to now listen to his ills for the foreseeable future. Well, I suppose barbers do the same thing. We're so bad at, especially men in Ireland, like we're so bad at actually just saying, oh, I'm having some problems, that we just trap someone in their profession, and it's like,
yeah,
and he can't rear up at me now because he's getting paid to be here and he can't leave.
I think we should just try to anyone listening to this podcast for the first time. This is not a podcast about haircuts. It is a podcast about football. So
no one about mental health, which is hugely important. And
yes, absolutely.
Is taking care of theirs at the minute because it's easier said than done. Bring your barber, might help. Who knows?
Absolutely. Obviously, guys, we might touch on the international break, which, if you want to maybe describe it at the start, started out quite promising. After Ireland's game against Serbia, we saw a lot of positives. Then it just went downhill for the rest of the duration. First question I'm going to ask, I throw it to Donnacha. Kenny in or Kenny out? And also the other part of that question, do we have to be realistic as a nation and just say that this Irish team, our standards at the moment are mixing with the likes of Luxembourg and Estonia and other nations that we have to just admit have improved over the years?
Yeah, so I mean, the first question, like immediately in the aftermath of Saturday, like I was really heartened about what happened in Belgrade. You know, we take the lead early, really good goal, really well crafted goal. You can't, like, we have a third, fourth, fifth, 18th choice keeper in goals, and yes, he makes a mistake and gets sort of embarrassed a little bit. That's just part of his learning process. So you make absolutely no sort of judgments on Travers for that. I just felt very sorry for him. But that seemed like, oh, you know, it's a new campaign. We're playing a slightly better football. We finally managed to score a goal. And then Saturday arrives, and Saturday was just one of these unwinnable situations. Like sometimes that like, so I can't remember who mentioned this, but I thought it was absolutely pitch perfect. It was like an FA Cup second or third round, a League One side playing a non-league team, and just getting rinsed. And initially, I thought that was a like fairly accurate description until you realise that actually, not that Luxembourg are world beaters, but the guy Rodriguez plays for Dinamo Kiev, who are a sort of not a perennial Champions League team, but certainly, you know, they've been there. They've been a prominent European team for a long time. So to answer the Kenny question, in the aftermath of losing to Luxembourg, as a headline, it looks horrendous. When I looked back at the nuance of it all and spotted that, like, Luxembourg actually are beyond Luxembourg is a nation, like, you think of Liechtenstein, you think of San Marino, you think of Andorra, but that's very unfair to Luxembourg, and that's just like an archetype that they have over the years. They've improved massively, like a little miniature Belgium in terms of how to play football. So Kenny in, yes, like, I mean, what's the point in getting rid of him now? Like, certainly he has to stay for the rest of the campaign. Whereas, you know, I was very much, it's a results-based business, we got to change something in the aftermath of the defeat. But on reflection, he should stay in. And then, yeah, like your second question, I totally agree that we just need to sort of reframe our standing in world football, and also appreciate that football is now very analytical, and there's a lot of people who work in this game on a full-time basis, that these aren't milkmen anymore. Even, you know, a country the size of Luxembourg probably has video analysts that know of our tendencies and set plays, probably do work, and the margins between the top and the bottom of the game are shrinking. We're unfortunately sliding towards the bottom, and then that chasm that used to exist between Ireland and those nations, apart from Macedonia, that's not Qatar or Cyprus, they don't really exist anymore. Yeah, so the last point I'd make is I was annoyed with Ken Early, who's a great pundit. I love listening to him on Second Captains. Initially, I was kind of like, there was more context. His version of how Saturday went was, listen, this is just a pot 4 team beating a pot 3 team. And I was like, there's way more context to that. And I still think there is, but he does somewhat have a point that, you know, the perception of what Luxembourg are and where Ireland were is the reason why it was considered a crisis point. Still a terrible result, but yeah, we're just going to have to move on and just maybe reframe expectations moving forward.
Yeah, obviously as disappointing as the result was, I'd be very much, again, Kenny in, at least give him till the end of the campaign, possibly the next campaign. Obviously, we'll just take one step at a time, see how it goes from there. But obviously, like, when we're looking from the positive at the start of the international break, or the start of the game against Serbia, we saw obviously the wing back formation. How well do you think that worked, O'Hara, because obviously a lot of people have been crying out for Matt Doherty and Stevens to be playing in their preferred positions. But do you think playing at international level, because they're not surrounded by the quality of player, that we're not going to see, obviously, Doherty and Stevens performing like they would perform at club level?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's very difficult for them to just translate it straight over to international when the international side hasn't played like that for I don't know how long, if ever. And so, like, the players might be used to doing it for their particular clubs, but they're used to playing with different players. And like that with the centre backs in the Ireland team, they're not used to playing in that sort of formation. Like, obviously, it started it looked promising in the Serbia game. And, looking back, we were really unlucky on it, especially with the likes of the Connolly trip and stuff like that. That arguably was I would say it was a nailed on penalty had VAR been involved in the game. And it was at 1-1 at that stage, and it was, halfway through the second half. So, and we still went on and scored another goal. So like, that was why the Luxembourg one was so disappointing, because there was, as far as I'm concerned, far more positives than usually ever is or are in an Ireland match. Which is good. At least there's that evidence going forward that, like, you can point to the Serbia match and be like, well, look, we did play very well for at least 60 minutes, if not more, of that game. Like, I think the whole uproar over the Luxembourg game and being like, oh, Kenny has to leave now, it's just ludicrous. Because why, like, I was saying this to one of the lads in work, like, the standards, like, again, Ireland has never, well, in my lifetime, necessarily been a massively high standard, because, we haven't been to a World Cup since 2002, and we've only been to 2 Euros since the turn of the millennium, like, but, like, you go back 10, 15 years, where you had the likes of Damien Duff, Robbie Keane, Shay Given, John O'Shea, like Steve Finnan, the bulk of the starting 11 at least, were all playing week in, week out at a top standard in the Premier League, where and still some of those Irish teams didn't get to the tournaments those years. Where you look at the current team, like, what Premier League team, like, if they're Premier League players, they're either very, very low down in the league, with the likes of Enda Stevens or something like that, or like Conor Hourihane is arguably one of Ireland's, most important players if we had our best 11 on the pitch. But, like, he doesn't even play week in, week out for Aston Villa. You know what I mean? So I think you what?
They packed him off to Swansea, where he's doing a great job, that must be said.
Yeah, but so do you know what I mean? So like that, if you look at the entirety of the squad, like, half of them are championship players. So it's very unfair to be comparing them to previous Irish players and Irish teams. And with the fact that, like, for so long, we've been crying out for a manager to actually start playing football and keeping the ball and trying to be a possession-based team, or try and actually play proper football rather than just hoofing it. To then finally get a manager who, with the setup, the way himself and Mick McCarthy came in, with the fact that Kenny knows the youth setup, knows a lot of the young players who will be coming through over the next couple of years, and wants to play an expansive, free-flowing kind of football. Like, it's ludicrous to then be like, oh, no, we want him out after 10 games. Like, it's not like it's just some random unknown manager that we've gotten in. Like, he was one of the most influential League of Ireland managers over the last couple of years. Like, his Dundalk team were, at the time, by far and away the best team in the league. Where, like if you say, for example, if he was given the squad that England had, he'd be doing very, very well. Like, even the argument of saying, oh, well, he's only a League of Ireland manager. Like, he was at the top level of the League of Ireland, where, like, even Gareth Southgate, who has had a few years now at the England job, like, the most prestigious thing he had was with Middlesbrough. So yeah, I think 100% the Luxembourg one was shocking, but I think going forward, it's definitely Kenny in for absolutely all of this campaign, if not the next one as well. Like his interview there during the week, where he was saying, I want to fix this. I want to build a team that the Irish fans are excited about. Like, that's what the Irish fans want. They want a team to be excited about. So why cut that off after 6 months and 10 or 12 games in?
Yeah, it's been seen like many times whereby a team can be more than the sum of their parts, and that's what's going to have to happen for the next era of Irish football, because there's no Haalands coming through. God Almighty, if we had one, they've got Odegaard as well. The Norwegians, they're coming into like a golden age for Norwegian football, and I suppose we'll probably get on to talking about Norway in a greater context in a bit. But the other point I was going to make was I kind of see a similarity in where Ireland's two most prominent sporting teams are right now. So if you look at the rugby just for a minute, Joe Smith has left, Andy Farrell comes in, and it was very much a succession as opposed to a new beginning. But for the first 8 or 9 games of Andy Farrell's tenure, it was like, right, well, what are you bringing here? What are you trying to do? What phase play is actually is where you're hanging your hat? How are you making these defensive systems work and line up? And it seemed really vague. And it was like what is this? What is Irish rugby about? Like there was no identity, and or there wasn't a performance to say, right, that's the team at a high performing level. Now, thankfully for the rugby team, the England game came along a couple of weeks ago, and Ireland were sensational, albeit against an England team who were all at sea, terrible discipline. They were poor for a lot of reasons, but maybe Kenny just needs that one performance, that one night. Maybe it's a fiery 1-1 draw against Portugal where we actually try and pass the ball. Who knows? And then things will look a lot better. The closest thing we have to that for Irish football is losing 3-2 to Serbia. It's not great. Like, I mean, obviously he needs more time, but I think he just needs that one moment, or we just haven't seen it. It was, so many hours without a goal, and that's just COVID injuries. Yes, I know, but it's such a results-based business, and to go, was it 9 matches without even scoring?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah,
at the start of a tenure, like just you'd think the whole new shiny manager bump that I know club teams get it more prevalently because it's the day-to-day, but it just wasn't there. Like it's still Kenny in, but it's just.
Yeah,
I've gone from expecting something to expecting absolutely nothing.
I think kind of the couple of points that O'Hara touched on was almost like modern day football fans that like Ireland didn't have a divine right to win that game against Luxembourg, but I saw predictions online of 4 or 5-0. And
yeah, like when was the last time Ireland ever scored 4 or 5 goals?
Scored more than 2 goals in a game.
Yeah, like the fact that we scored 2 was a revelation.
Yeah, but I think that's like one of the points that O'Hara touched on is the modern day fan where like, oh, you just get rid of him. Like there's no long-term plan. Irish football has been crying out for something like this. The structure, like we've been left behind by the likes of Iceland, by Luxembourg, by the smaller or the so-called smaller nations in terms of their setup, their potentially just how to develop their own players. But even just the comparison that Donnacha used there of the Irish rugby team. And the first thing that came to my mind when you mentioned that was you're only as good as your last game. And obviously we look at the rugby campaigns that, okay, there's kind of a better buzz, a better kind of atmosphere around the rugby team because of the result of performance against England. That's why I think it could have been like, it would have been so important to get a win against Qatar, because then for the next 6 months or whatever till September, obviously I know there's a couple of friendlies now in June, but till we play Portugal, that's whatever September, and that's without any wins, any victories. Even if we had won that, I know it was a friendly, I know it was against Qatar, but again, Qatar are not a bad side, and I think that's what Irish fans have to realise is that Ireland's standard is no longer the standard that we had kind of under, we'll say, Mick McCarthy, even under Martin O'Neill to a certain extent. Those players, like I remember fans giving out under the Martin O'Neill, Roy Keane era of the players aren't good enough. But when you compare those players to what we have
that
now,
team's far better than the team we have now.
Knock your hand off at them. And I know it was the time when Hendrick was coming through. I remember looking at it after the Euros and going, James McCarthy, Jeff Hendrick.
Robbie Brady looked like he was about to explode onto the thing.
Yeah.
And realistically, he hasn't been seen to.
But that looked like a really, really strong midfield for the next 4 or 5 years. But it's all been pretty much kind of downhill. But just one other thing I want to say, I believe Mick McCarthy, when he started his first tenure in charge of Ireland, he went 7-8 games without a win. And when you think, and when you think back to, I think Stephen Kenny actually mentioned it in one of his press conferences, and he also mentioned Michael O'Neill at Northern Ireland, and also mentioned that Luxembourg beat them as well. So he was just saying again, it's a work in progress. But when you look back to Mick McCarthy, look at the players he had available, and he couldn't get a win with that team. You obviously look, and he's after bringing through obviously the likes of Malumbi, giving Josh Cullen more of an opportunity. Obviously, Gavin Bazuna, who's probably the real positive out of the international campaign. He was a bit mad a couple of his decisions though against Qatar, but there are things you don't mind to see because it's his first game. He's trying things. He's going to learn. And I know Donnacha touch on Travers. And yeah, like I genuinely felt sorry for the chap because I knew he was going to get slated straight away. And it was a really, really poor decision, but like these things happen.
It was just poor. It was, it was being hypercritical. I mean, you're probably told with under 14s that if you're standing in no man's land with a guy who's 40 yards out, if he notices, you're in big trouble because. Like what Mitrovic did was opportunist. Like, was it one of the greatest goals ever scored in international football? No, he literally just has chipped the ball into a net from 40 yards because essentially there was no one there. Like the Travers situation was just kind of unfortunate. I think one last point I'd just make on the on Ireland's situation now is in terms of the draw that we got when Portugal, Azerbaijan come out of the hat. And then Luxembourg come out of the hat. I would say Luxembourg and the Faroe Islands would have been two teams that you really, really would not have wanted because their name says one thing and what their team does now says a very different thing. And just banana skin of all banana skins. Like we still see that Andorra and San Marino and Gibraltar still, well, actually, maybe let's not mention Gibraltar because we struggle against them. But it was just the team that you really would have wanted to avoid. I'm sure the Luxembourgians would have been very much looking forward to that game. And one last thing I came across about Luxembourg was that their last away competitive win was in 2008 or 9 against Switzerland. Who've been in the top 10 in the world now for a while or hovering around. So, yeah, like that nation as a sporting nation was very misleading, I think, for us. So we played a much better team than what was written in their jerseys essentially.
Yeah, and like I'm just having a quick look through kind of some of the results of other qualification groups, and like. Kosovo scored against Spain. Quality goal. I don't know if you saw it. The keeper came out and made a mess of things. Quality goal. Liechtenstein scored against Iceland. Obviously, North Macedonia beat Germany. Armenia beat Romania. I know you can say Mkhitaryan has an influence there. Kazakhstan drew with the Ukraine. Moldova scored against Israel. Andorra scored against Hungary.
Georgia were very competitive against Spain as well.
Yeah, I think a lot didn't they lose it in the 92nd.
Oh yeah, that's right. So they only got a 93rd minute winner or something.
Yeah. So like I think a lot of those so-called smaller nations, they're doing something right. Or they might have that one star quality player, which Ireland don't. Like we just don't have that one player. Like I said, Armenia. Mkhitaryan is their one quality standard player. They might have a couple of others as well. But I just look at that Ireland team, and O'Hara mentioned it earlier. You look at Enda Stevens, confidence rock bottom, club rock bottom of the Premier League. Darragh O'Shea down there with West Brom. Shane Duffy's not getting his game at Celtic. Darren Randolph to a certain extent, he doesn't play week in, week out with West Ham. So you go through that whole team, there's not a lot of confidence. No. Like I know you can throw.
There's no confidence whatsoever.
No playing rhythm. Like I'm sure even at the elite level, players learn like maybe on a micro level from game to game, or a certain instance in a game that means they make a better decision the next time. And like, you know, those little professional sports people always talk about the margins now being so small. And if you've got a bunch of players that are literally, their working week is just training and then sitting on the bench or worse on the weekend, you're just not going to have that those kind of decisions that have to be made in an instant on a football pitch. You've got no chance. So that's almost irrelevant to the quality of the player to begin with. That I'd much rather we had League Two players who had played an entire season than having even some Premier League players who have, you know, 60 minutes of game time for the whole year.
That was the thing. Yeah, that was the thing. Like, say, I wouldn't have watched a lot of League of Ireland football, so I wouldn't have seen Jack Byrne play a lot. But that's why drafting him in and actually playing him made sense when they obviously ended up not doing it. But like, if he was playing every week, and from what I heard, playing very well for Rovers, like, what was the logic of bringing him into the squad if he's not even going to get any game time? Like that, like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, when after the Euros, where, you know, Robbie Brady had been kind of the star, like you were saying, Gary, like, you know, a lot of the countries, they have just one standout star, and then they've just a load of workhorses around them, like, or like just a load of players who become the sum of their parts, and then they have the standout player. So it seemed that maybe Brady would become that, at least for a couple of years or something like that. Yeah, where he had such a great Euros, and there was this whole thing of giving him the number 10 shirt for Ireland and stuff, which I found bizarre at the time, because sure, the squad numbers change every time there's a new squad. But he's disappeared. He plays every now and again for Burnley, like, and he's supposed to be our talisman, as Donnacha said. Like, there's such a sparse amount of just consistently Irish players playing week in, week out, who are actually part of the senior team.
Yeah, and I'd look at the players that we have in the squad, and I genuinely would say Alan Brown is our biggest threat in terms of scoring a goal, because in fairness to him, I know he missed a couple of chances in the playoffs and a couple of other opportunities as well, in other games, but he's actually quite good at getting into the box and kind of trying to get on the end of things. I know he wasn't obviously that accurate with some of his shots and some of his finishing, but
at least he's trying.
Yeah, I was
just going to say, at least he's the one actually getting in and getting on the end of the chances.
Yeah,
I think Collins, he's got a couple in 8, doesn't he? He's got a couple of goals, and he you know, it was, I don't know whether it was a bad miss or a great save when it was 0-0 in the Luxembourg game. Ball, I think Callum Robinson fizz one into the 6-yard box, and it's just one of those where keeper just hits him. Like your man Collins doesn't seem like he seems like he doesn't seem like a lost cause. Like he seems like he's got ability, he's got goal scoring ability. Potentially not at the level that we urgently need, but
at least he seems like a player who's going to absolutely run himself into the ground.
I think this generation of Irish footballers, the last thing you could ever call into question is their commitment, work ethic, that kind of stuff. I was listening to a podcast the other day. It might have been on The Guardian, but I think it was Barry Glendenning was actually mentioning that he had spoken to Tony Cascarino, and they used to absolutely love playing for Ireland, all his generation, because they'd go play for Ireland and they'd also go out on the piss, have a damn good time, and like it was almost like a holiday. Now, there was a bit of a stag do kind of mentality to it. I'm not advocating everybody should just sack off training, let's just go get full. But to combat like the pressure on them all and the sort of doom and gloom, if Stephen Kenny, like, if you could take 10% less professionalism, I don't think that's going to correspond to 10% less performance. I think it could potentially correspond to like just a much better psychological feeling for players going to play for Ireland. Like there are probably some players who's like decided to play for Ireland almost as project players. Now I'm not sure of who has Irish parents and who's not, but maybe some of them are like, Jesus, I wish I just had this week off. Like, I'm not naming names because I don't have any names to name, but if you decide, international football, and then 3 or 4 years ago, you could play for Ireland. So you say, yeah, great, that's brilliant to play for Ireland. And now you probably just want to be Jamie Vardy, sit in your ass, play some PlayStation, and just chill out, rather than entering into, like, especially if you're a player in a struggling team. Like Enda Stevens is a great example. Now, obviously, Enda Stevens, hugely passionate and playing for Green. I'd never call that into question, but you think psychologically he's going from, or Kieran Clark, another one, he's going from pressure, poor performing team into pressure, poor. Just can't get away from it. That if you could make the Irish camp fun, I don't know, playing devil's advocate, can it get any worse? Is one training session going to be the difference between losing to Luxembourg and not?
Yeah. I don't know if you have any suggestions for to make.
Well, it's all framed in, like, obviously the context of COVID right now. Like, but if the next time when you get to June and it's permissible, get those boys out on the golf course and a few beers. Just forget about football.
Just before we finish up, actually, on just talking about Ireland, I don't know, did you ever hear the story of Kenny Cunningham and the lads obviously all used to stay in the hotel out by Malahide, I think it was.
Yeah.
And Kenny Cunningham would always rent a car because he'd like to kind of just go off and explore and drive around. But he was saying he never drank, he doesn't drink. So if the lads ever wanted to go into town, Kenny Cunningham was the lad been the taxi. But he recalled the story a couple of years ago on Off the Ball, and he was talking about when he was driving, and he said it was like one of those clown cars where there was just like about 20 lads. I think it was in a Ford Fiesta or something like that, and there's about 20 lads bailed into the car, and as they were driving along, he said, I think it was Niall Quinn was sitting in the back, and he was winding back his chair, so Kenny Cunningham was end up driving like this and could hardly see over the steering wheel. He said someone else, I think Gary Kelly, took off the headrest and chucked it out the window. Someone was sitting in the boot with the boot open driving along, and Kenny Cunningham was just praying that he got everyone home safe. That was his main concern. But again, that just shows like that was like the togetherness of an Irish camp. Like to have those stories to fall back on and share later on. Whereas
had the crack together. It seems like just a chore to go to the Ireland camp now.
And I think for most international teams, it's hard to say that actually. You can't really say that because I am not part of an international setup and I don't know what the day-to-day is like. So disregard all of that. I just think that based on my experience as a human being, if you could somehow, and not like necessarily drink related, somehow just instill a bit of crack into that group of players when they can get together. And if that means you don't do an extra video session in the afternoon and you know, what, like any kind of...
Go out and do a bit of paintballing or something. Some sort of
anything. Yeah,
like a group exercise.
Jeff Hendrick out for the rest of the season when he fell over a tree stump playing football. That'd be an excellent headline. But it's probably something that's maybe not particularly practical, because obviously if it's then in the press that a bunch of like lads did karaoke or something and someone got on the table pretending they were Bon Jovi and fell off and hurt themselves, or there'd be the, oh my God, this is a professional team. Oh, everybody would just hop on and pitchforks out. So you're in a catch-22 kind of situation. But I really do. The point that Barry Glendelling made about what Tony Cascarino was telling him about how much he used to love Ireland because there was an element of fun, that just really resonated, because like the national team can't be all serious and dour and you know, like, work hard by all means. They can't be that when the Irish football fans are such a laugh. Like, you know, it's almost one kind of entity, and if you can instill the same kind of atmosphere through that camp of players, you just might start seeing better results. I don't know.
Yeah, and we might just kind of try finish on a positive. Malumbi, Cullen, O'Shea, Bazuna did quite well over the international break. Callum Robinson did surprisingly well.
I thought Callum Robinson was actually very good.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to finish on a positive, and obviously, I think the fact that North Macedonia beat Germany 2-1 last night just made all of us feel so much better.
Absolutely.
Especially when you saw that Timo Werner miss. Oh my goodness.
Shocking.
And there's tweets of mine last summer of me being so excited that Timo Werner's coming
Oh,
on.
I don't think I can't remember being more excited for a player that we ended up not getting. Like,
yeah.
It was so nailed on. I was like, oh my God, he's going to be unbelievable for us. And it's like, he's like Torres reincarnated when Torres went to Chelsea.
Or Shevchenko. Like,
wow.
Or
yeah, exactly.
Or Chelsea just ruined strikers. I don't know what it is. I don't know what's going on down there. It's like
Shevchenko as well.
Yeah, the Space Jam kind of.
Yeah.
Space Jam bit
That's
of.
my favorite analogy.
Going on down at Stamford Bridge.
I read somewhere, obviously, I think Timo Werner has 5 goals in the Premier League, but his expected goals was close to 10.
Yeah.
Something like that. So that kind of just sums him up. But guys, we might just move on to obviously an important issue that was kind of highlighted even more so throughout the international break and Qatar human rights. But before we kind of delve a bit more into that, I'm just going to throw the question out there. Do you think Ireland missed an opportunity by not showing that same sort of support as Norway and other nations, Donnacha?
Yes. Emphatically, yes. I'm not saying that these acts by Norway, by Germany, I'm not saying they're world-changing events. We are in an era where these kind of protests and gestures have become tokenized to a redundant level. But the fact that we were playing the nation at which, you know, there are 6,500 families without a loved one based upon the just barely even human standards of the working conditions to build those stadia. And also the fact that we ain't going to be there on a practical level. I felt strongly that Ireland should actually stand up to this. I thought it was fantastic the way Norway did it, the way Germany did it too. Like a boycott of like, right, we know that that World Cup went there through like underhand tactic, you know, and flow of money, and it wasn't a fair race to see who was going to host it. And it was a bad idea for about 20,000 reasons. But in order to boycott it now or something of that ilk, it just means that those poor people who died building the stadia, they actually died for nothing. Like that's the horrible situation you're in now, whereby if let's say, with the issues they had about the heat and now the fact it's going to be a Winter World Cup, let's say that went another way and it went, actually, I know you gave us loads of money, but this doesn't work and everybody's pissed off, we're taking it back. Like, imagine now if you've got all these half-built stadia and at the time, whatever, 3,000 or 4,000 workers that have perished, and how desolate you'd feel if you were one of their like loved ones. So yeah, like we totally missed a trick. Like I don't agree with Miguel Delaney on like plenty of sort of footballing matters, because I think he's like, I can understand why his existence is like he's very cold and calculating about football now because he's entrenched in it, and I think he's lost a bit of his romance for the game. But whenever he writes about the wider topic of sports washing or specific to Qatar, I always read it. I always agree with him. Like if if matters are, if these matters aren't taken seriously enough, like they're just going to keep happening, and whether it's like working conditions or human rights, or whether it's racism, or like I'm not like what I don't know what the solution is, but certainly silence is complicit to me. And Ireland should have. And it was nice. I'm glad that Stephen Kenny brought it up pre-game, but yeah. One final thing I just wanted to say about it is that there's a counter argument that's prevalent that with Norway, for example, that if they're protesting about this, then they have to protest about that, and they have to protest about this and this country and that country. And such a nonsense argument that is. The whataboutery, it just drives me nuts. That it's like if just because you're protesting because one country are doing a bad thing means you're obligated to protest about every country that ever did a bad thing. Like, I don't understand where the logic is in that. If you see something's wrong and you have an ability to change it or change people's minds about it, then I think it's your obligation to do so if you have the platform. So, very long-winded rant about why Ireland absolutely missed the trick in not showing their displeasure at that. No, with the Qatari players, it's not on them, but it's their FA. And how they've orchestrated building the stadia has just been like, is it modern day slavery? Come to the Middle East, your family will join you in 6 months. Here's a salary. They take your passport off you. They never mention about your family again. And you go into a workplace that's a death trap.
Yeah, Harry, just before I ask you your opinion on it, just Donnacha brought up Miguel Delaney and making certain points. Do you want to share just some of those points with us, Donnacha? Just because we'd love to use this platform as well, obviously, to kind of get the message out there, to educate people on what's actually going on or what's happening. Do you want to share some of the points that Miguel?
Yeah, well, I mean, like, the fundamental argument is this term of sports washing is now incredibly prevalent. So basically, like, in a nutshell, it's certain regimes and certain cultures are trying for reasons of profitability, are aligning themselves closer to Western culture through sport, and in doing so, they are trying to sweep their human rights records and the way that they operate under the carpet. So, an example of sports washing is like the prince of the Man City's owner is essentially the prime minister of the UAE, and the reason he got into Man City wasn't just because he loves football. For example, Saudi Arabia now have a Grand Prix. That's not just because they love racing, and just this is the latest version of it. That it's all. Miguel Delaney's point is that, like, they use sport to try and just the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. If the left hand is we love sport, while the right hand is oppressing their own populations, for example, and it's horrendous. And another version of it is going to be if Joshua fights Fury in Saudi Arabia. Like, I'm sorry, but like the Formula One example, how can you give a race to a regime where it's like just conclusively proven that a journalist goes into the Saudi consulate in Turkey and is gagged and suffocated and chopped up into pieces? How can you give them a Grand Prix? Like, you're literally sleeping with, like, you're in business with an evil human being and an evil regime by extension, and just so because they have money, it's fine. I just really it infuriates me, and it's kind of a hopeless thing because, like, what can I do? Not much. But it's really awful. It's just, there's a total abdication of any kind of morality whatsoever.
Yeah.
You know? That's the crux of Miguel Delaney's argument. He's written many articles about it. I really would recommend you go check them out, because he it's something that he believes in strongly, and it's a fight that he gets flack for, especially from Newcastle fans when that takeover was going to happen. But I think he has a lot of integrity, because people don't necessarily want to read about that stuff, but they should.
Yeah. O'Hara?
That's actually literally what I was just going to say. Like that, when that was one of the main reasons behind the proposed Newcastle takeover, was to try and iron out all the human rights issues in that country. Yeah, no, so obviously Donnacha just mentioned it, but yeah, like that was one of the reasons there was such uproar over it, because it was like they were just trying to, brush all the issues under the carpet and be like, oh well, we're Newcastle owners now, so we love football and we love all of you, so you should love all of us.
The fact that I don't necessarily have an issue like them, coming into sport and bringing investment and all. It's the fact that there's no reform mentioned. It's not like every culture and every country, it's to greater or lesser extent, has made mistakes in the past. It's not like they're owning their mistakes and they're trying to be better. They're fully continuing to perpetrate these kind of horrible working conditions on migrant workers in Qatar, for example. Like it's not like they're trying to repent and do something benevolent. They're just like, don't worry about all these dead bodies. Oh, look, shiny stadium and big money fights, and oh, look at the Grand Prix. Don't worry about that. Don't open that door, And the door's wide open. We can all see what they're doing, Just it's not right.
O'Hara, I was going to put the question to you, like, what do you think needs to be done? Do you think players, for example, need to boycott the World Cup? Would players even do that if there's an opportunity for them to represent their country at a World Cup? Do you think supporters will have to boycott the World Cup? For example, would you refuse to watch the World Cup, or do you think supporters might refuse to watch the World Cup or refuse to go? And also, do you think this could be brought to another level? So it's not obviously just international level, but be brought into the Premier League, for example, like taking the knee, or I think a lot of national teams did the pointing at the respect badge on their sleeve. Do you think it can be incorporated maybe into, or do you think it's important to be incorporated into the Premier League and other leagues around the world? I know there's a good few questions in there, but
yeah, I'll try and remember them all. Yeah, I think it's a very hard one, really, because like Donnacha touched on it earlier in terms of like, if we were ever going to boycott it, or if the World Cup itself was ever going to be boycotted, it should have happened years ago. Like, we've known since 2010 that it was going to happen in 2022 in Qatar. So like, there's been years and years of knowing that like there was underhandedness even getting to host it, like having to build, like they had to build like 7 or 8 stadiums. They'd have to build all the infrastructure, hundreds of kilometers of roads, the conference centers, training facilities. None of it was ready, so we already knew. So it was like bizarre that they even got it, obviously. So straight away there was red flags. But we're 9 years into, or sorry, we're not, we're 11 years, Jesus. 11 years into knowing that Qatar are going to host it. So like, realistically, it's far too late to be making any of these sort of arguments. Like, this is what I was saying, like, as Donnacha said, like, there's been 11 years of building all this infrastructure and all these stadiums where it's been thousands of people working on them, and then the thousands of people who have died because of working in those horrendous conditions. Where, what, a year? Like, imagine saying that to them. Oh yeah, well, you've been working on this for like a decade, but we're a year out from it, and we've just decided, no, we're actually just going to boycott the whole thing. Like, you'd understand, and it should have happened, because it was a travesty that it happened, that they got it, but it should have happened within the first few years of us knowing, because then as well, that gives more than enough time to whatever country could potentially have taken over doing the World Cup. Like, there's so many countries across Europe even who have more than enough facilities to host something. Like, say when Germany did it in 2006, they just have all the stadiums. The country is ready to host a World Cup. So it was just a case of, they needed the years in advance to make sure they could handle the influx of all the fans that were going to be there. But for Qatar to have needed to basically, Grant, we're going to host the World Cup. Now we have to build everything that we need to host a World Cup. It's just bizarre. So it definitely 100% agree. It should have happened in terms of boycotting it. Like having the World Cup in Qatar for years, I was still always like, surely to God, it's not going to actually be held in Qatar. But at this stage, it has to. Like it'd be such an insult to all of the people who built all of the infrastructure to not hold it there. But it's like to have it in a country where people people don't want it to be held there because it was done illegally. Like it's done at a time of the year where no one has any interest in having it at that time of the year, which impacts, like that's going to impact 3 domestic seasons across the next couple of years for all of the leagues around the world to try and restructure their domestic leagues to fit in with this ridiculous World Cup that basically everyone is just like pissed off about.
It just goes to show you. Sorry, there's an echo or reverberation going on. If everything about a decision is wrong, but the numbers are right, then it's right. The numbers were right in the context of all the money that Qatar were going to pay to have that World Cup, all the money that those FIFA execs were going to pocket. Oh, lovely second house out of France. Thank you very much. Maybe it was their 6th if you're Sepp Blatter. Everything about that proposal was wrong. Everything. Logistics, the infrastructure required, the fucking weather, like everything was wrong, but the numbers were right, so it's a go. And I think that's where this whole issue of sports washing, where it just is really, it's really alarming at how that once the money's right, it's a go. Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, money's right, it's a go. Women are allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia for a couple of years. Let's not worry about that too much. Let's not show our distaste at how backward and ridiculous that is, because the money's right, so it's a go. And like until people like in powerful positions en masse stop selling their morality for an extra zero in their bank account, this shit's just going to always happen and continually happen. And it's capitalism run amok to the point where there actually is a monetary value placed on a human life, or 6,500 human lives in this thing.
Yeah.
Just the last thing I want to say about this, and sorry, because I'm a bit ranty, because it does, like, it really pisses me off, and I apologize for being ranty.
It's good content, Donnacha.
But well, I mean, that's for listeners to decide. It is or it isn't. I don't know. But the last thing I want to say is there was a stat that I came across when I was watching the Workers' Cup, which is the documentary that sort of that frames this entire argument of Qatar and the debts and the working conditions. But there was a stat, I believe, that came from that, which at the time said that if you were to have a minute's silence for every migrant worker who's died building the stadiums, the first 40-odd games of the World Cup would be played in silence, which was absolutely outrageous, whatever the figure was then. Now the figure is 6,500. And I did the numbers myself, might have got them wrong, but as what I could work out was, if you were to do it now, a minute's silence for every single individual who's died building those stadia, you'd have to add an extra 9 games to observe it for every individual.
Right.
That's
disgrace.
Just insane. Just to frame the context, every minute you're watching that World Cup, there's not enough minutes for the amount of people that died building those stadiums.
Yeah, just to touch on the documentary that Donnacha mentioned on Amazon Prime, Workers' Cup, but I think you can find it under, I think it's Football Hell as well. I think it might be a way to find it. So we'd strongly encourage anyone to watch that, just to get an insight into what's actually going on, because it's obviously a reporter, a guy that goes in with the undercover cameras and witnessing the working conditions, witnessing the first-hand stories from the workers of how they've been falsely dragged into these situations. Heard of a story as well where one of the workers from Nepal, I think it was, and they were obviously they were found out by their their bosses that they were communicating with a documentary. So he was sent back to his country, but they took his work paper, his work permit off. And so when he arrived back in Nepal, he was put in prison, put in jail, because he had no work or no proof of that he was working when he was over in Qatar. So that's just one story of thousands and thousands of different stories. But just on, obviously we're saying World Cup out of respect for all the workers should go ahead. But I'm just wondering, like, if a big name star like a Ronaldo, like a Messi, obviously not Messi Messi for the World Cup, if they were to boycott it, how much of a message would that send out? Because I was just thinking back to, wasn't the Women's World Cup, and Heigerberg, I think her name was, and she boycotted the Women's World Cup because she wanted more respect for the women's game. And yeah, we could potentially say the women's game has grown since then. But I'm just wondering if a big star like a Ronaldo, Mbappe, a Haaland were to come out and say, right, I'm not going to the World Cup. How huge would that be? Do you think that would kind of hit home for a lot of people that, again, might not be aware of everything that has gone on or is going on? It's again, it is a tough one, because you if you were to put yourself in the shoes of a footballer, they want to play at a World Cup, and for some people it might be their only opportunity to play at a World Cup. So I don't think and I think football fans might be very critical for the fact that they go ahead with it, but I also think you can't be very critical of a footballer. No,
it's not their fight. And for someone to do that, it would take a huge amount of courage and self-sacrifice to do it. So I wouldn't expect it from anyone, and I wouldn't be critical of anyone who goes and plays for their country in a World Cup, wherever it was going to be. Like the people who can affect the outcome, and it's as Dave says correctly, it's too late now, is not the players, it's the sponsors. It's like, if let's say Kylian Mbappe is like, I have been moved by this documentary, and I fundamentally believe that I cannot play in Qatar because of the abuse this country has perpetrated on these workers. Nike ring up and go, yeah, Kylian, but I mean, you're playing, like, you're playing. I think it would be the sponsors. Like that's a football World Cup. That's a FIFA World Cup. That, I think, next to the Olympics, that is the most marketable. Like, to have a sponsorship of the FIFA World Cup is hugely valuable in terms of its reach and its impact. That if you're a Visa, for example, and you're like, well, we're pulling our sponsorship, we'll find someone else because you're not having our money because there's blood on it. And if there was a domino effect in the realm of sponsorship, because that's where the money is, and all of a sudden, because Qatar, obviously, like, when you host any kind of event, whether it's a Ryder Cup, a Rugby World Cup, a Women's World Cup, anything, there's like it's going to cost X and it's going to generate Y, and the Y is to be a multiple of X in terms of how much money the sponsors bring in. And in a normal situation, like, the Qataris have almost unlimited financial resources, but they would project the lead sponsor will play with 300 million and 200 million. If all those sponsors just like, nope, then all of a sudden the whole thing would have collapsed. Now, this is going back years ago, and again, it probably means not much to a regime that essentially has unlimited financial resources. But that's where it would have, where the power sort of lies, I believe, in the sponsorships.
Yeah, and again, the common denominator is money in all this. Like, every aspect, whether it's Formula One, whether it's the boxing, it's money driven. Money driven at the end of the day. I was just going to, because obviously O'Hara just said about good content, and we obviously love listening to Donnacha and his views on things. I was literally going to throw out two words for you, Donnacha. Richard Keys.
Yeah, I scanned that article that he read. Who knew a guy who was living tax-free in Doha would have come out in defense of the Qatari state. Like, it just blows my mind. It blows my mind that he thinks they're lovely people. They're salt of the earth. Yeah.
Lovely people, yeah.
Yeah.
Love living over here.
No ulterior motive. Like, in fairness to Richard Keys, like, you know, if I'd probably be doing anything to stay relevant as well. So best of luck to Keysy.
Yeah, I think we can leave it maybe on that. But I was going to say, well, obviously in regards to Richard Keys, O'Hara, anything you want to kind of finish up on in regards to Qatar human rights before we move on?
No, yeah, like I think Donnacha hit the nail on the head there with it. Like, as you were saying, like if any of the big name players or if an amount of them were to say, oh, you know, I'm not going to play, like, that would be a big deal, because like fans would be like, oh, why? Like, you're the star, you're the reason we want to watch the World Cup. But at the end of the day, by those players doing that, the only person they're hurting is themselves, because they're cutting themselves out of a chance of playing the World Cup, which, you know, fair enough, if you're one of the stars like Ronaldo or Bale for Wales or something like that, you're going to be, you know, you'll be like, okay, maybe I'll do it for this one, but I'll have the next one because my country's definitely going to get there and I'm the star of the team. But like, you have players who, you know, they might be in the form of their lives now. Like, 4 years is a long time. They could end up, this is the peak part of their career, and this is the only major tournament they get to go to play, or they might get to go to the Euros either side of it. But the World Cup, like, as much as it's only for every 4 years, so as a football fan, you can kind of tend to forget about it until it comes around again. But like, if you're a football player, or like, you know, when we would have been young and be like, oh, we're all going to become footballers, like the pinnacle of world football is like winning the Champions League or winning the World Cup. Like, so what would any player with ambition would, in no right mind, would be going to pull themselves out of a World Cup when it only comes around every 4 years?
It's not their fault, you know. It's
yeah, exactly.
They're admonished in my book that totally, like, they're sporting athletes, and you know, thankfully we do have some sporting athletes who use their platform for good. The one that sticks out in my mind immediately is LeBron James, who's now a minority owner of Liverpool FC officially.
That's delighted.
So yeah, it doesn't even more. But you know, like, and in fairness to him, not that I'm his biggest fan, certainly not in the sporting context, but Lewis Hamilton is another one. Like, you don't have to use your platform, you can. I mean, and there isn't an obligation, but some people who have the moral, the stomach for it, decide that, yeah, I'm actually going to use this for good, and those guys deserve a lot of credit. You can be LeBron James or you can be Floyd Mayweather, you know. To you. Really?
Perfect. So guys, we might just finish up on a little bit of fantasy football. Obviously the Premier League is back. Everyone is delighted. Everyone's buzzing.
Thank God.
International breaks behind us. We can forget about it for another few months. Just going to throw out the first question. Is anyone tempted to throw in Sergio Aguero into their fantasy football team just on the back of obviously his announcement during the week and the fact that he might possibly get a few more minutes on the pitch for City? O'Hara, we might start.
I think it'll be dangerous. I think it'll be dangerous ever trying to think you know what's going to happen in Pep Roulette now, to be honest. Yeah. I think when it comes to a case of, all the signs are pointing towards this happening, I'll get him in my team and he'll be on the bench and he won't come on, or he'll come on with 5 minutes to go. Because that's just what Pep does. Yeah. He just loves to fuck over fantasy football players.
It makes a lot of sense that Sergio, provided he's fit, would play the run in to the league, because the league's done and the one that they want is going to be midweek. And I mean, if you I don't know. Like, for me, a 60% fit Sergio Aguero is still a better option than Jesus. It could happen. He's not going in yet. There's one guy who's going in, who is emphatically going in, who's somehow a midfielder, and he can't stop scoring goals. And we know that is Shirley. O'Hara knows.
Oh, I know too, Donnacha. I know.
Oh, he's got to go in. Like, I think Jota is he 8 million quid in the round?
Is he even that?
Something like.
Oh, you've muted yourself.
Yeah, sorry, no, just my brother who's just finished his like about 4 weeks of quarantine just arrived. Put that out on the podcast. No, Jota, what is he? 8.5 million.
I think. Give me 2 seconds.
I don't even think he's that much, is he?
Yeah, that's what I said. I don't know if he even is that much.
Yeah, he's ludicrously cheap. And he'll be transferred in by everyone who's still actively playing the.
Right, so you said 8 and then you said 8.5.
I'm going to say 6.7.
Oh, you bastard. That's exactly what he is.
Is it? Actually.
He's what? He's 6.7.
6.7, yeah.
Wow. Absolutely outrageous.
Like, that is ludicrous.
That is. Because as well, Firmino's coming back to fitness. And to be fair, he doesn't start at the minute. Unless you play 4-2-3-1. But I'd imagine Klopp won't. So yeah, Jota is like the least surprising tip of the week in fantasy land.
Yeah, exactly.
What O'Hara, what's well, you're right up there in the money at the moment, aren't you? I think you're competing for the top 6. So
yeah, 6th at the moment, yeah. So
I'm sure you don't want
to maybe get up to maybe 3rd or 4th.
Yeah, I'm sure you don't want to give away too much to your competitors up there. But what are you thinking for this game week? And obviously taking into consideration game week 32, I think it is, when Spurs have two games that week.
Yeah. It's an interesting one really, because like say the last few weeks had been I suppose geared towards the few double game weeks that were on, and then obviously that they led into the blank game week, which was the last game week we had before the international break. And so I suppose in my head, that had been what I'd been building up to. So, that period of 3 or 4 weeks. But kind of unbeknownst to myself, I would never pick a player really if like I'm getting him in. But then like in 2 weeks' time, he has shocking fixtures. You know what I mean? So I'm actually very, very well set up for this week in terms of, who you would have wanted in kind of a, were we to have done a wildcard Wednesday type situation, realistically, I would have nearly picked probably 7 or 8 of the players that I do have. But I think just looking at it, like the international break generally I find is a good time for, you kind of take a week off fantasy football thinking, and then you can kind of wean yourself back in by, maybe doing a bit more research into different teams that you hadn't really copped onto. And one that I was actually really interested to see how kind of a prolonged period it has been, but like since Tuchel came in, Chelsea's defense has been unbelievable, which I had only kind of been passively watching Chelsea because of obviously, I'd be watching every Liverpool game, and then just the morale. And actually I used to always watch Match Today, but then when Liverpool were playing poorly, I just like, all right, fuck it, that's the only football I'm watching this weekend. Do you know what I mean? Fuck everyone else. But since Tuchel has come in, they've played 10 games in the league and kept 8 clean sheets, and they've only conceded 1 in each of those 2 other games. So like straight away, I'm like, bloody hell, I didn't realise that. I'm absolutely getting in a Chelsea defender. So looking at it, it's interesting because Tuchel is starting to get this kind of reputation similar to Pep for kind of rotating his players and not being able to figure out who's going to play, because like that you would have thought, say being a new signing last summer, Ben Chilwell, like he's came straight in, he was their starting left back and is arguably undoubtedly their best left back, but since Tuchel came in, he's missed out on 3 or 4 of the games. It's only really, as far as I can see, Azpilicueta and Rudiger, who I think Azpilicueta's played every 90 and Rudiger has only not played 1. But like even taking the Premier League out of it, like the 10 in the league, 8 clean sheets. As well, they've had 2 FA Cup games and 2 Champions League games. Both of the FA Cup games they won 2-0, and Champions League was 1-0 and 2-0 against Atletico. So like, it's phenomenal. Like, conversely, I wouldn't be going near their attack. Like, Timo Werner is in the worst form of his life, and where they've kept 8 clean sheets in those 10 games, I think they've only scored 11 goals in those 10 games. So, yeah, at the moment, staying well clear of Chelsea's attack. But I'd say if you were ever to do a double up on a defence, Chelsea's the way to go for the next few weeks anyway.
So again, my next question was going to be to you. Would you play any of the City players this weekend? Number one, due to Pep Roulette. Number two, the fact that it's Leicester away.
Yeah, I've been emotionally scarred by a City player this season, because I refuse to believe that it was out more than a little spark of form, and that was for the whole season. I haven't had Gundogan once, so that's why I'm in the relegation zone in most fantasy teams. Who do I have at the minute? Oh, to compound the error, I put Sterling in most recently when there was the double game week madness.
Oh,
and the Shitehawk got a grand total of 4 points, including the double for me.
I felt that pain as well, Donnacha, don't worry.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do.
Yeah,
I tweeted a zoomed in picture of his little avatar on fans. It was just like, never, ever again in capital letters. I have Diaz, who I've had for a long while. He'll stay put. He's the only City player I currently have, actually. I had Foden for a while as well, sort of the Pep bingo. So no, I probably won't dip into City for this week, but I doubled up Kane and Son again, with a view to the fact that Spurs are going to have 2 games now soon. So they'll probably stay. And I was going to swap Son out for Jota, but obviously I don't need to now because Jota is on sale. So that's great.
It's the April Fool's discount.
Yeah. But no, I'll be honest. I've almost given up this season because the Gundogan, my shout on Gundogan, and just the fact that I didn't think he'd carry on the form, and he did emphatically forever, has just ruined my fantasy football season. So it's not that I've given up, but I'm going to try and win the final monthly prize. I'm going to try and win April somehow. And by winning April, it will mean that Gundogan's had a really shit month because he's not going in now. I mean, it's over now.
Sorry, Donnacha, did you say you brought in Son or?
Yeah, I brought him in a couple of weeks ago and he got injured. And there's still a question mark. He's got a hamstring injury. So yeah, I brought him in and immediately he got injured. So if somehow by the butterfly effect I caused that, sorry, son.
Yeah.
I think I'm in the clear though. I don't think a jury can convict me of that one. And actually for the last week, I did quite well for the half game week because I brought in Rafinha, as we'd spoken about, Gaz, and I brought in Jack Harrison as well.
Oh,
and
nice.
who did they beat? Was it Villa? All three of them pointed. There was a goal for Bamford, a goal for Rafinha, assist for Harrison. So that went quite well. So I don't want to get rid of Rafinha or Bamford. I might get rid of Harrison though.
O'Hara, who are you planning to captain this week?
It's a good one because the Leeds fixture is quite tempting, and I have both Bamford and Rafinha. So both of them are in good form, and it's coming up against bottom of the league, managerless, hopeless Sheffield United. So that's definitely a good shout. But with stuff like that, it's always hard to. If there's more obvious ones, it's hard to stray away from those in terms of you could be like, grand, I'm going to go for a differential here and I'll smash everyone. But they're a differential for a reason because it's more likely not to pay off. So I think I'm most likely at the moment, I haven't nailed it on yet, but at the moment I'm most likely to have Kane as captain. He's in good form, and again, like Sheffield United, Newcastle are looking hopeless at the moment defensively, and Kane, as far as I know, has a good record against them, but he's he's one of the highest in terms of, the likes of expected goals and stuff like that. And so generally, and I'm not a fan in any way, shape or form of Harry Kane, because it just does my head in. Me and my dad, he's one of me and my dad's, like, just, people you just hate for no particular reason.
Hang on a second. Back up there for a second.
What?
Anybody having that one? That was an attempted joke, because Harry Kane's always trying to back up into defenders and break their necks. Hey! If the joke is so subtle you have to explain it, it doesn't make the podcast.
It's good. No, we're
keeping
it
out.
We're keeping it in. But yeah, so I generally have no time for him. But that's one of the reasons he does my head in so much. When he's in form, he just seems to continue to score.
Yeah, he's a machine. He's in my team too. He'll definitely be my captain. Yeah, I know you didn't ask me, but
I was going to say full house of Harry Kane, but you do learn something new every day. I never realised how much hate O'Hara had for Kane.
Oh, big time. Like, there a couple of years ago, the two most hated players in the O'Hara household were Harry Kane and Dele Alli. My God, me and my dad could have just gone on about it. Like, every week watching Match of the Day. And my dad would be a very kind of like chill guy most of the time. You should see him when Tottenham are playing and the two of them are on the pitch.
Why'd you hate Dele Alli?
Just.
Is it because he Wales funny?
no, like, just the, like, just, I don't know, his attitude and he used to be diving all over the shop a few years ago as well. He was just doing her head in.
Do you know what? I'm really, really surprised Sergio Ramos didn't make an honourable mention in that hate list.
If we want to get into the conversation, we could be here all night. I'm sure Donnacha will be there as well.
I don't know. I might need to get a Red Bull for another rant.
With bells on.
Ranted out, but for Sergio Ramos, I'd make an exception. I'm actually just in the context of Liverpool and all things Champions League related. I'm disgusted that he's out with the two legs.
I'm really, really disappointed he's in.
Yeah, I don't look at it as, obviously it does make them weaker. You can look at the cold hard facts that they're a weaker side without their captain and their leader. But I wanted revenge so much, and not violent revenge, just scoreboard revenge and tears in a kit. Just would have been really nice,
But it looked really like Salah was entirely gearing up for that. Like, the minute we got Real Madrid, there was footage coming out of training where, like, Salah is just climbing up the wall with just his arms, no feet or anything. He's just like, and it was like, he's like out for revenge.
Yeah, he's like John McClane in an air duct. Yeah, he was.
And it was like nothing to him. You could have looked at it, and if you had seen only a cropped amount, you'd be like, he's climbing a ladder. We're like, no, he's just going up, just using his arm.
My brother-in-law is a very high level rock climber, and said that Salah's form was flawless. That he'd make a good
class.
Some people are just good at everything.
Yeah, but yeah. So from that point of view, Salah looked so ready for revenge. So I'm most disappointed. Yeah, I'm most disappointed for him, really, that he won't be able to. He'll be able to get revenge on the club. But it was Ramos specifically that I'd say he was gearing up for.
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of climbing, I'm obviously hoping to climb the table this week, having Kane as captain, coming up against a Kieran Clark that's going from, as Donnacha quoted earlier, a pressure situation to a pressure situation. Yeah, so that's my captain. But guys, might wrap it up there. As Donnacha said, his brother's home, I think, or something like that, and he needs to get a Red Bull into him as well. So, thanks again, gents, for jumping on to the fancy kickabout. Again, look forward to having you back on again at some stage in the future. Enjoy the football this weekend. At least we don't have to worry about Ireland for another few months.
Yeah, it's a relief. Thanks, guys.
Brilliant. Chat to you soon, lads.
Pleasure as always.
Take it easy, lads.